Welcome to the Curator's Choice. My name is Ann Shafer, and I'm your host and resident curator. In these episodes, I focus on a single work of art, or sometimes a set, usually a work on paper, and I take you through what goes into my thinking when I find and decide a work is worth it, and I decide to pitch it to the museum I used to work for. I'm no longer there, the Baltimore Museum of Art. So I have been skipping along through works that I have both pitched to the museum in the past and have either acquired or not acquired. But today I'm going to talk about a work that I didn't pitch, but I got a chance to print it just the other day. So I thought it'd be cool. All right, let's take a micro break, and when we come back, I'll start talking about Tru Ludwig. When I started at the Baltimore Museum of Art back in 2005, I was working in the print department, and it was me who hosted the classes who came in to use works from the collection in order to teach. And there were so many wonderful professors that came through that I met that way. And it was a joy to see students' eyes light up. That was really, I think, probably the highlight of the highlight of my time there was watching students kind of go, "Oh my God, I need to go try that." But I never expected to become close friends with any of the teachers that I met until I met Tru Ludwig, who is one of the rare art historians who is also an artist and equally talented in both realms. That combination is special because those people can not only tell you about the background of the history of the thing that they're talking about, but they can also tell you about how it was made. And sometimes that is a super complicated affair. Back in 2005, Tru was teaching the history of prints at the Maryland Institute College of Art, the renowned art school in Baltimore. Tru brought the students up to the BMA for 6 sessions. Well, at first they came for a couple of sessions, but in the end, it was 6 full sessions in which I and my assistant and sometimes an intern would pull 80 to 100 prints per visit. It was a lot. There was a lot of pulling and a lot of putting away. There were a lot of moments when I wasn't focused on what Tru was saying during class because I was busy shuffling the works of art and putting the interleaving back in or whatever. But there were also moments when I knew enough to get ahead of myself so that I had time to stop and listen, because Tru is astonishing when he gets on a roll. There were always moments when I would get goosebumps or the tears were welling, and most of them, I would say that there were key moments in the semester that produced these kinds of things. One would be Rembrandt's Three Crosses. Another would be Max Klinger's Die Hand Schuh, Kate Colvitz's Battlefield, Leonard Baskin's Hydrogen Man, and Peter Milton's Hotel Paradise Cafe, for different reasons, obviously. We taught that class 18 times together, I think it was. And it just, I don't know, every time I just come out of the class exhausted, but so enervated about art and art history. But since I'm no longer at the BMA and Tru is no longer teaching the history of prints, I convinced him to join me in creating a podcast series on the history of prints. Plate Mark Series 2 is underway. We've just gotten through Durer just now, and it may seem counterintuitive to talk about a visual art in an audio form, but I kind of like the challenge of drawing you in and then letting you see the works. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. So the images, as we talk about them in the series, are available in the show notes of the episode, as they are for this also. I encourage you to check it out. It's going well. Meanwhile, I've been apprenticing at Tru's studio, the Purple Crayon Press. Earlier this year, I helped wipe and print 2 large etchings for the first time. I mean, I've watched the process many times, and this time I got to put the apron on and the gloves, and I got to ink and wipe, and I don't know, it was such an education for me about how many things can go wrong, how many things can go right, how serendipitous it all is. Because what you may not know is that if you're a curator of prints, you don't ever necessarily have to have made one. I mean, you have to know theoretically how the things are made so that you can recognize them and describe them to people, but you don't ever have to have done it itself. It's not a requirement. But I can say it certainly helps to understand just how finicky and, and weird these processes can be, because it does add an extra layer of reality. So recently, a couple weeks ago, I was lucky enough to spend 2 days helping Tru print another of his etchings, a magnificent etching that the edition had never been completed. And I can so see why. It was huge. We accomplished printing 3 impressions over 2 days, and it took all day, both days. It's a large print called Tapestry from 2005, and it consists of 2 large sheets that are joined in the center. Each half is 2 plates, one brown plate and one red plate. So that basically means we printed 6 2-plate etchings, or the equivalent of 12 1-plate prints. That's a lot. But it was so rewarding when it comes together. Like, it's just so great when you pull it off the press for the big reveal. And I mean, it's just, I want to go live in a print shop. So, TapHistory is a play on the format of the Bayeux Tapestry. It's a really important embroidered length of fabric that tells the tale of the lead up and the Battle of Hastings in 1066, when William, the Duke of Normandy, France, defeated the British upstart Harold, the Earl of Wessex, following the death of Edward the Confessor. They both had claims to the throne, and so they went at it because each thought that they should be the next in line. It is thought that the outcome changed England because the Normans won. William was crowned king, William the Conqueror. And it's thought that the outcome of that changed England forever. It's changed the language, it changed the architecture, it changed the way of life for the future in massive ways. The tapestry was created only a handful of years after the battle, and it offers vignettes that tell us about military strategy, about armor, about cooking conventions, about fashion, and all sorts of stuff, life in this time period, especially on the battlefield. It is huge. It is 230 feet long and 20 inches tall. So it wraps around a huge room when it's all hung up. And there's a museum dedicated to the Bayeux Tapestry in Bayeux, France. So worth a side trip. I haven't been. Tru has. No surprise. The main action takes place along the center, and the top and bottom borders carry other figures and stories. Sometimes they're fables or cautionary tales about, things that might forecast the future and, portend the destruction of, Harold, the Earl of Wessex, and his. In fact, he died on the battlefield. Tru's print mimics that format. There's a central action and then a top and bottom border carrying other supporting information. In the central section, there's a map of the world, the kind that you would find in National Geographic. It would be, they were all folded up and inserted into the magazine. And when you got it, you could pull out the map and unfold it. And it was always, I don't know, I love a map. So it was always fun for me. On top of the map, noted in tiny red stitches that are mimicking the stitching of the tapestry, Tru has laid in these arrows that are paths of conquest by various peoples across time. So the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vikings and the Mongols, and this sort of interwoven set of migratory peoples as they were conquering country after country. Well, they weren't countries yet. But it also includes art historical quotations. That's Jacques Louis David's Oath of the Horatii in the lower center. It depicts 3 sons and their father issuing an oath to each other that will result in only one son surviving an upcoming land dispute battle. And then in this left center is Emanuel Leutz's Washington crossing the Delaware in reverse. They're going the wrong way. And then over to the right in Japan, you see 2 mushroom clouds that rise above Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And just above Washington, back in the US, there are the Twin Towers in New York City. One is streaming smoke that takes up almost a quarter of the upper quadrant there. And the other is about to be hit by an airplane. And remember, Tru made this shortly after 9/11, It is a reactionary print to 9/11. Just took a few years to get it all made. To the right of the Oath of the Horatii is Muhammad borne aloft by the Buraq. It's from the Turkish version of the Progress of the Prophet, 16th century. I confess that I don't know a lot about that one. We'll have to ask Tru to weigh in. And the text running across the top of the central panel is, "A quest for righteousness can never be repressed," which is a quotation from Nelson Mandela from 2001. In those triangular spaces at the right and left edges, on the sort of where the map does its curve, are quotations on the left-hand side from Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince from 1532, and opposite on the right-hand side are excerpts from the Baltimore County Public Schools letter that was sent home to families following 9/11 about how to talk to your children about what happened. Tru's son was in the Baltimore County school system at that time. Overlaying the brown map in the central panel is a red outline, a chalk outline, possibly, if you will, of the dead Toreador figure from Edward Manet's painting, which is down in Washington, D.C. at the National Gallery. Then across the top, in the top border, are partial faces of note. You can just sort of see them from, the middle nose up through their eyebrows. On the far left, and from left to right, we have Brian Sweeney, one of the pilots who died on Flight 175, which crashed into the South Tower on 9/11. Then next you have the imagined angry eyes of the Statue of Liberty. In the middle, you have Mohammed Atta, who was allegedly flying Flight 11 when it crashed into the North Tower on 9/11. Then you have the figure of Shabat Gula in a full burqa. She was the young woman with the starkly beautiful green eyes who was photographed by Steve McCurry in 1984 and was on the cover of National Geographic the following year. Google it. You will be amazed at her eyes. They're incredible. And then on the far right is Ogadai Khan, the son of the Mongol warlord Genghis Khan. And then along the bottom are small packs of warriors heading into battle from various periods of history, along with the Chinese proverb, "War does not determine who is right, war determines who is left." Now, I've often suggested to artists that they reduce the number of elements in a work, thinking that if one thing said the thing, well, that you don't need 5 things to say the same thing. And when I look at Tru's print, I see cacophony. There's so much going on, and there's so many references that he actually wrote a key to it so that people would know what the references all were. But I also see his deep commitment to making that point. Why are we doing this? Why do we keep repeating history? Why do we not learn? The number of elements that all point at that point are many. It's, as I said, cacophony, but then that's the point, right? There are so many examples of this kind of conquest and war and tragic deaths that have and continue to occur. It's maddening. So my thinking is, of course, that's exactly what this print needed to be. It needed to be, hey, remember this time and remember that time and remember the Assyrians and remember whoever was at war with each other. What was the result? To what end? How many people died? So it is an epic print, one that I think is super strong. I feel like I now know it intimately, having printed it recently, and I continue to be impressed to the core by my friend Tru Ludwig. So hats off to you, Tru, for sticking by your convictions and not backing down. The Curator's Choice is produced by me, Ann Shafer. I'm your host, your resident curator, your writer, your editor. I do all the sound mixing and video editing. So if it's crappy, please forgive me. It's a lot. I also want to thank Michael Diamond for the use of his original music, and a special thank you to Tru Ludwig for being an extraordinary friend, a passionate and talented artist, and crack art historian. I can't quite imagine the last 16 years without you, so thank you.